really delighted to be able to be asked to host this panel discussion this evening, picking up on the themes of this really important and timely report that Karoli's already talked to, and as she's already mentioned, with a general election coming up, we know, given the kind of, as I say, somewhat toxic, that's probably a little bit of an understatement, rhetoric around immigration, that it's going to continue to be something of a battleground throughout that kind of whole campaign, and probably kind of the focus of the government afterwards as well. I spend a lot of time working with chief people officers, and I know from that there's probably not a single organisation of any shape or size or sector that isn't struggling to hire right now. I mean, there's definitely certain kind of skill pain points, but basically, as Karoli put it, we are in this enormous kind of talent crunch, and simplifying the process for hiring international workers would definitely make things so much easier. I don't know who's read the report yet, but as it lays out very, very compellingly, and as Karoli's already highlighted, most business leaders across the UK's kind of mid and large size organisations think the government has made it too difficult for them to hire international workers, and the vast majority believe that the UK needs to be made more attractive and easier to bring those people in. So we're going to bring that topic to life through a panel discussion, and then after about half an hour or so, I'll also open it up to questions from the floor. So I'll just introduce our wonderful panel. I don't think I need to introduce Karoli, because you gave us your life story, but I will introduce Tanya and Nick. So next to Karoli, we've got Tanya Channing. Tanya is Chief People and Culture Officer at Pipedrive, which provides cloud-based CRM software for small businesses. Apparently they've got loads of posters on the tube right now. I have not seen any. I'm obviously not paying attention. But Nick assures me they're kind of everywhere at the moment. And Tanya has a track record in people leadership and building thriving company cultures, having worked in HR leadership at a range of high, fast growth tech firms, as well as brand names like Burger King and Red Bull. Pipedrive has more than 1,000 employees spread across 8 European and 2 US offices. So navigating international talent markets and immigration systems is something that Tanya is well versed in. And next to Tanya, last but not least, we've got Nick, our token man, which you don't normally get on a panel these days. Nick is partner and head of immigration law at law firm Kingsley, Napley, where he advises on all areas of UK immigration law and provides strategic advice to businesses on their global immigration needs. So he's here to answer your particularly difficult questions during the Q&A. Thank you all for being here. So let's go into discussion. Nick, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay. What can you tell us quickly about recent changes in immigration policy, kind of the context behind them, what's driven them, and what impacts they're already having?
Okay, thanks. And Karoli, thanks for the report, because it really is excellent, and I recommend anybody who hasn't read it to read it. There's some great data on surveys that you've done for employers, so I just endorse that massively. Well, the UK, it's all about the numbers. You'll have seen the last few years the press reports on net migration. That idea sort of disappeared off the radar for a while we had COVID and nobody was really moving around and there wasn't much going on. And then we had a war in Ukraine, we had the whole Hong Kong visa process, and we had people coming out of the COVID sort of quagmire and starting to move again. And that included lots of health workers, people who needed to staff care homes where we haven't been investing any money for a long time. And that all created this perfect storm of lots of people coming to the UK after the pandemic, and the numbers being the highest ever, 745,000 in 2022, and in 2023, 672,000. So, big numbers, the biggest we've had for a long time. And the government hadn't really thought about net migration for some time, and when they did, they looked at and they said, well, look, we've got a very open immigration system. It's actually relatively easy to hire somebody globally. If you want to, let's just make it more difficult and cut the numbers down. So, they've attacked it in lots of different ways. They've attacked students, they've attacked dependents of students, they've attacked care workers and their family members. They've attacked families of British citizens by upping the income levels. But most significantly for employers, they have attacked the skilled worker visa system by simply pushing up the basic minimum salary to 38,700 from about 26,000, and also massively increasing what are called going rates. So the salaries that you have to pay people in different occupations you know, across the board, where that was previously set at a sort of relatively low level, so you could hire people who were new entrants, you could hire people who were fairly young, early stage in their careers. Now that salary's gone up very significantly, in some cases 45, 50, 60, sometimes 80% in some occupations to now. And they've also got rid of something called the shortage occupational list, which has affected a lot of roles in IT, in architecture, places like that. So you've got big jumps in salary. And this is a very blunt instrument being used as an economic lever just to dampen down demand by employers for the shortages that they're trying to fill, for the skills that they need. The government is saying, well, look, if you really, really, really want them, you're going to have to pay higher salaries, and on top of that, you're going to have to pay these massive immigration fees, which are going up and up and up, and they've been going up for a long time. There was a big jump last year, and again this year with the immigration health surcharge. You know, the government is collecting enormous amounts of money from migrants, and I don't think people understand that migrants are actually a cash cow for the government. They are, you know, they collected £2.2 billion in visa fees. Half of that is profit for the Home Office. They collected £1.7 billion in immigration health surcharge last year, £500 million in the skills charge, which is supposed to go to upskilling Brits but doesn't. So, you know, all this is and companies are paying for this. They are paying for it, and it's actually, it is causing a problem now because people are really thinking, I can't hire those junior, highly talented people from abroad. I'm having difficulties running my graduate scheme because the salaries are too high. So it's causing all sorts of problems, but also it's such a blunt instrument that it doesn't actually consider regional firms that pay less. It doesn't consider startups that don't pay big salaries and might pay in equity. It doesn't consider lots of other things that are, you know, the variety of employers that we have, the variety of sectors. You know, and it's such a blunt instrument. It's just sort of like, bludgeoning employers to say, don't hire foreigners. And that's not what we need right now.
And I guess we'll come on to this.
That wasn't very short, sorry.
No, it was pretty short for a lawyer. That we don't have the skills to plug those gaps anyway. So you're saying the sledgehammer to crack a nut, yet there's nothing long-term kind of skill system being built to fill those gaps. I mean, Tanya, coming to you as an employer, I mean, the report finds that almost 6 in 10 larger businesses are relying on international workers to fill skills shortages. Is that reflective of your experiences? How do you kind of engage with international talent?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, particularly we're in a tech business and a growth business, so accessing tech talent is my number one priority. And to be frank, I'm not only looking where the addressable market is, but I'm also looking at how easy it is to access that talent at the right cost. And you mentioned earlier, Karoli, at the point where it can be an easy employee experience. So I'm looking at all of those factors. I mean, Pipedrive has had a very successful run, actually partnering with Jobbatical for its time of history to hire many international workers in our core locations. But of course, that's not the UK for obvious reasons. But we have over 60 nationalities at Pipedrive, which is incredible. And it brings that diversity of thought, like it's brilliant for innovation, like just the culture alone is an eclectic pot of people which drives for psychological safety and all of these great things that I love and appreciate about our Pipedrive culture. So it's absolutely essential, and quite frankly, if I can't get it here, I'll look elsewhere. And there are plenty of places in Europe that do this really well, particularly the digital economies. Like, they make the process easy, the pool of talent is available, it's all addressable, and it's just such a shame. So for me as a Chief People and Culture Officer, I mean, I'll go where the addressable market is to find the very best people for the job to be done, and I'll look for that as easy as I can find it, you know, and I don't want the barriers in the way.
I think there was a phrase in the report, isn't there, about kind of we're shooting ourselves in the foot here. I mean, Karoli, you work with lots and lots of different businesses. Tell us a bit more about the kind of current pain points and how that's worsened in the last year or so.
Yeah, I think the pain points, and probably a lot of us actually know and feel it, is one of the things that we're seeing is companies across Europe where we operate are, so flexibility is the new name of the game. So it's not only that I have a nice mission and vision, but how do I attract people to actually come in to stay with us? So what I see is that from companies' side, you are trying to really not only how we have been used to working, but like, for example, allowing people to become digital nomads and work between, you know, maybe you want to be 3 months in Italy and you want to be 5 months in Spain. But the question here is, does this flexibility, is that even enabled by the country? And the other thing is, which now going back to what you both were saying, is that just the simple basics. So this is a future, digital nomad employees, kind of a future work that has arrived. So this is like a way beyond a normal just relocating somebody to your office. And I think what we are seeing definitely is that when we work with multinationals, just like you said, is that companies who hire to one place, but if policy changes for them, I mean, it's sad, but they will just hire to another office. And so we see, for example, a lot of movement to Portugal, we see a lot of movement to Spain, and actually there's a lot of, even Spaniards are not known to be fast, but there's a lot of innovating policy that has been, even they, both of them actually, Portugal, Spain, have now applied also the digital nomad visa. So we see that countries are trying to figure out how to compete. And that's why it's especially surprising to hear when you know, cuts are made in a way that not even, because we had a brief discussion, Nick, with you before, that when the policy changes were made here, it wasn't even a question that was asked, should we do it? You know, is there any danger of doing it? Like, what will happen? So I think for us, and why we want to drive this discussion is that if we don't have those discussions, those things will not change. And definitely we see that the competition has grown, and a lot of countries are actually using that in a smart way. So we have to speed up on that here as well.
Mm. And Nick, from your perspective, when you're working with clients and all kinds of organisations, what have those changes at the end of last year done? How are people reacting? Have people got their heads around them yet? Are they actually having an impact on kind of hiring, talent strategy, workforce planning decisions?
It really depends what sector you're in. You know, if you're a bank or you're a law firm, an international law firm, people, you know, they don't really worry about these things because they've got loads of money to spend on hiring and on these things. If you're in the tech world, if you're in the startup world, if you're in retail, if you're in hospitality, those businesses are really questioning their business models. They're questioning, you know, whether they're going to be able to get particularly young talent in, that I mentioned before, into the UK, whether it's even worth getting them in, whether they need to put them somewhere else. A lot of people are talking about, you know, some people moved away from sort of hub models, having different hubs for different, particularly business support bits of the business, because actually business support is one of the areas where the salaries are not, you're not going to be able to sponsor a lot of people. So those sort of hubs, those hub models, we're seeing those being revived and people thinking about those again. So people having an HR hub in Mexico or somewhere, you know. And I think we're going to see that movement of exactly what you're saying, finding the right place to hire those people, where there's a good environment for them to be, where they can do their job, you know, and they can travel relatively easy somewhere where they might need to be once in a while. So we are seeing people responding, but some clients have just said, look, we're going to have to actually probably stop hiring junior marketing people in our business, because, you know, we can take maybe graduates because they get a special discount. But if we're hiring sort of people a couple of years out of university who are living abroad and want to come in, forget it, you know. And even the big difficulty is, if you're hiring graduates in the UK now, it's all fine for a little while they have this special new sort of entrant young person's discount. But when they hit the real world of real salaries, suddenly you're having to pay them masses of money. And companies are looking ahead and thinking, actually, I'm not going to be able to pay that person this in 2 years' time or 3 years' time, whenever they come to the end of that funny discount period. So, you know, people are having to think quite far ahead about hiring decisions now, thinking about what that will mean in a few years' time.
I guess it would be quite easy to be caught out as well, or you could end up in a situation where you're bringing people in on 2-year contracts and then throwing them back out into the world.
Well, I mean, you know, we're sacking you because we can't put your salary up by 20%.
And isn't it also kind of creating the opposite, to like how you have, in order to hire somebody that you need to hire, you have to raise their salary significantly higher than somebody local. So it's actually, so your maybe a local person will not get an additional job because you had to invest into that position more, right? And maybe just a comparison, because Tanya, you mentioned about different offices, because I know Pipedrive also has an office. I'm natively from Estonia, a tiny digital country, Northern Europe, and who has done a lot of crazy, kind of good crazy things in order to also attract talent. And just the comparison, for example, like in Estonia, it's possible to you bring somebody in, so from a visa country, you can, in 2 weeks, you just register them. It costs less than 100 euros, and they can start working in 2 weeks. And if it's a non-visa country, basically next week they can start. So the thing, it's just, the friction is so low that you don't, and that's why you said also that you just don't think about it even. Like, it's not a thing to discuss.
Yeah, so you've got a lot of countries that are just lowering the barriers to entry so much. I mean, Tanya, I'd love to hear a bit more from you about kind of how immigration policy in the various markets that you're operational in, how has that influenced your kind of talent and recruitment strategy in the past, and how do you see it doing so in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, it's totally influenced it, and not just for us at Pipedrive, but if I look back on my career and all the technology companies I've supported, you know, I've spent a huge amount of time of like looking at, okay, what's the cost of the Java developer in London? Okay, there's only like 28,000 of them. That's not addressable really, because everyone's competing for the same talent. It's a super high price point. Actually, the government's not been investing in growing those capabilities. I'll go elsewhere. So in the past, like setting up development hubs in the likes of Bucharest, Poland and whatnot to source talent, because also those countries were investing in the pipeline very early on, so the talent pool was much wider. So, you know, I'll go again where the talent is, and I think from a Pipedrive perspective, we're lucky that we've got these 60-odd nationalities which create this eclectic mix, and therefore I've got big hubs in Estonia, Lisbon's our second one, like Portugal is brilliant for tech talent. Interestingly, we have an office in Berlin, and actually we have no native German in Berlin. Like, and that's just representative of what Germany are doing, right, to deploy their talent and open up their borders. And you know, that's not a problem for us either. It's like, again, it's about creating that diversity of talent and mix. So yeah, I mean, you as a CPO, that's what you do. I mean, you find those talents, and I think you also accept that the world is becoming more mobile, and you know, they want that sort of mobility. So the other thing we do at Pipedrive is, for you know, certain months of the year, we allow people to go and be that digital nomad and work in different countries. And what's really interesting is, for our Europeans, they've got more free reign. For our Brits, they're like, can't get their head around it. I'm like, you do realise Brexit happened, and no one's really thought. So even from you know, a UK employee perspective, they haven't thought of the consequence of their travel, or how, you know, restrictive that can be, and then all that tax is a nightmare, where for everyone else we can enable that freedom, flexibility, which is just such an amazing employee value proposition. Because if I can retain and keep this valuable tech talent that I've been investing in, then I'm going to do that. Like, that gives me a hedge above all my other competitors. So that freedom and that flexibility and that mobility is super important, because people want to be able to have that option.
And how has it changed how you think about the UK and like your future in the UK?
Yeah, very little here, in the UK, to be honest. And that's not because there isn't great talent here in the UK, but the cost of accessing it, the cost of talent, the rise of salaries and whatnot, it just makes it a less viable proposition. I mean, even the finance firms and whatnot, I've worked in fintech prior to here. I mean, you have to be looking at the cost. Like, you know, no one has an easy EBITDA margin. Like, top line growth and cost is, you've got to get that balance right. And therefore, it's ridiculous for anyone to think that they've got infinite amount of pools of money just to invest in any talent. At some point, that's going to dry up. And, you know, I think part of the job of the Chief People Officer is becoming more of that financial lens as well, about how do we make this business economical, and how do we drive the value and growth and get the value from the talent. So workforce planning is so important, and the cost of managing that is as well. So you're going to go elsewhere, which is such a shame. Because it doesn't bring the opportunities for our people to grow as well in this environment. And, you know, I think we'll lose the talent eventually, and that just becomes, you know, a bit of a travesty, to be quite honest.
And I remember just after the pandemic, a lot of the conversations that I was having with CPOs were, you know, somebody's gone home or has decided they want to work from Spain, or they just want a change of scene and they won't come back, but we don't have an employing entity. And Karoli, starting with you, I mean, Tanya mentioned that kind of desire for flexibility. What are the options here, and what would you like to see being possible?
Yeah, there's actually a funny story. I don't know, but the story is that one of the things, even though it's not directly related to our business, but one of the things that we started to see some years ago was that the flexibility is coming, and more employees want to, have the digital nomad life, but there was no policy actually supporting it. So we actually, with the Estonian government, we created the world's first digital nomad visa. And now 59 countries have adapted to it. So that's why I'm also optimistic about this discussion here, that we can actually change things. And I think what we're seeing definitely is, and that's super exciting. So first of all, now the digital nomad visa, which enables you to allow, so you can actually allow legally for people to work. Because in general, how it is that you have a tourist visa, you're not allowed to work, you go and you are employed by a local company, or you get married, and if you get married every 6 months, it's not very scalable, right? So now with this digital nomad visa that more and more countries are adapting, not here yet, so let's advocate for that. We are seeing that companies can actually do that. Plus now the rise of the EOR, so basically the payroll companies that enable you without having an entity, and I think that is super cool. I think probably like 70% of my team is employed through EORs. So which means that you can set up, we don't even need to set up an entity. You can, your employee from America says that I want to move to Italy, and you don't have an entity that you can set it up and without a problem. So I think what we're seeing is that the private sector is popping up a lot of those solutions that enable us to give the flexibility. But I think, again, that's where the policy becomes a problem. So if the policy doesn't enable it, though if there is no visa to support it, Tanya cannot let her employees illegally work in their desired country. So I think that's where this there's a little bit of gap still.
Yeah, tension there. I mean, Nick, from kind of the legal perspective, what is actually possible in terms of kind of visa options if you are, desperate for international talent and your people are desperate for kind of more options?
Yeah, well, just pay a lot of money and, everything's fine. I mean, that's pretty much the answer. We have some other visa categories, but they're very small. I think the Times did a report last weekend, that the numbers of global talent visas and high potential individuals, which are two sort of things that were touted as being great, the numbers are really small and they're really hard to get. Global talent has a sort of 50% refusal rate. There's a lot of people who try and don't get through, so it's not very predictable. And if you're, an employer who wants to get somebody in quickly and you're going down a route where there's a 50% chance of success, are you going to do that? Probably not. So it's a bit tricky. And there's no real other options other than this main route in, which is the skilled worker route. Now, the skilled worker route is super fast. If you want to pay all these big fees, we can get people in within a week. We can press a button on the system. The person go and apply for their visa, pay some even higher fees to get priority visas. At the end of the day, we can get them in very, very quickly. But it's super expensive. So that is still the main route. The other side routes are very small. There was an announcement today in the EU that they are going to open up discussions with the UK on youth mobility, which is very exciting, breaking news. So that may help to alleviate some of the issues and provide other routes for people to come in different, probably lower skilled roles, but that's only a temporary thing that's not going to happen for some time.
So the answer is basically bottomless money pit. Great, there you go. Karoli, you've talked a lot about kind of the importance of, I guess, engaging with policy. It's something that you've done yourself and kind of leveraging influence. How would you advise kind of business leaders to go about leveraging kind of collective voice to actually make any kind of change? I mean, particularly, I guess our current government in the UK, not super focused on talking to businesses, it seems.
Yeah, I think this is something that me and Philip, who also from, unfortunately he couldn't be here because he's hosting an investor dinner today, but otherwise he would have been here with us. But I think this is something, and that's why we also worked on this report, is to actually start or helping to kind of get the data together. Because the question here is that it's only possible to have an impact, just like we actually, with the digital nomad visa, we built a case why a country needs that. So I think here we need to really kind of work together to build a case. And I think right now is the best time to do it, just because it's not only us, it's not what we are seeing here, it's the global trend. And the global, like we said, I mean, we're showing on my paper that what is the price difference between Germany and the UK. And this is basically taking the competitive edge away from local businesses. That I think the networks such as Philips are a really good way to actually start organizing that voice. And the thing is that most of us feel like we don't want to be part of this political debates, but we need to be, because again, it goes back to the user experience. You can build the user experience, but if the framework is not supporting it, it's not enough to actually be able to win. So I think this is why this discussion, we are going to use this report. Philip is going to use this report and kind of working together in order to actually get the attention of the policymakers. And honestly, if they see the numbers, I think they are going to get interested.
This is your 5-10 minute warning. I'm going to open it up to questions soon. So do think of some questions, because it's really awkward when I ask and nobody puts their hands up. But before we get to that, I want to address the points that also came out of the report, but kind of, I guess, the softer side, the more cultural side of employing international workers. From your perspective, Tanya, like 60 odd nationalities, what impact does that have on culture, on innovation, on what it feels like to work at Pipedrive?
Yeah, I mean, Pipedrive would not be Pipedrive without it. I can't imagine the culture without that range of people, their experiences, from how they communicate to the questions they ask. I mean, you said it earlier around, you know, the innovation, the thoughts. Like, I get challenged by different employees, you know, on things that I would never have considered or thought of. And that makes me better as a leader and as somebody who's like setting the tone and deciding what the policies are within Pipedrive and what we're going to invest in and how we're going to scale. So I genuinely couldn't imagine without that at all. And I think also, if you think about your customer population, our customers are global customers. They're representative of multi-nationalities, diversity. It's like, you can't develop product if you don't understand your customer well. Like, our whole voice of our customer is super important about identifying their needs. And I think, you know, with a very diverse and global mix of employee base, that helps that a lot, because you've already got it ingrained within the culture. The other point is the psychological safety within the business is huge, and I think that is so important from a diversity perspective, because anything is achievable when people feel safe at work. You can go through so much together and come out of the other side, and you create a very resilient workforce. I loved when you said earlier, like, you know, like the point about people going and living abroad, like, it says something about, you know, their like resilience, you know, their ambition, you know, just how much they can take, because it's tough. It's tough living and moving to a whole new country, and that is a whole new exploration. So tapping into that entrepreneurship, like, just becomes part of the DNA. Like, I, honestly, if I compare this business to other businesses where I've worked or led where we don't have that much diversity, this is night and day. The speed, the thinking, the challenge. Don't get me wrong, it's also very tough, because trying to unite all of those perspectives, political views, religious views, sometimes it can get misunderstood at times. But because of the psychological safety and the transparency that we create within our business, people feel safe, and then our Pipedrive values allow us to question and be kind to one another and assume positive intent and treat each other with kindness and be nice. That, you know, we then like manage to coexist in this melting pot, and it's just amazing. Like, it's brilliant. And the food is incredible, because people come and cook and bring amazing things to work, right? And bring their little lives and cultures into the office, which is also super nice. Like, you get a real sense of someone's identity and what they belong to. And I honestly wouldn't have it any other way. I think businesses that aren't this diverse are missing out.
And Karoli, in terms of like the kind of the challenges, and how do we address kind of cultural integration and helping people everybody to get along, no matter kind of where you come from, and as Tanya said, when there are, you know, the inevitable misunderstandings?
Yeah, there's a lot of, so one of the topics that we in the business leaders, HR industry, we talk about is culture fit, and I'm a huge advocate of culture add. So I think kind of finding the fit of culture is kind of, like you said, if you hire people who are actually, my board member and a former chief people officer of Netflix has said it really well, that hiring culture fit is like hiring people with whom you want to have beer on Friday evening. So actually, we should embrace the culture add that people bring, and because again, like we humans, with every travel that we make, we grow as humans. The same way every person that comes with their different culture helps us as an organization to grow. So what should be aligned is what you already mentioned, is values. So I think so we have set certain values as an organization that we should be aligned on, because if we're not going to be successful. So if we're not aligned on values, you as an employee cannot be successful, we cannot be successful with you. So I think it's important, and that's part of our hiring process, is that at the end of the process, usually I have this kind of, I'm the filter of values, because if we don't fit there, it's very hard to work together.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that on top of the value piece, one of the things we always say to people as well, our Pope drivers, is, look, you can have different political opinions and religious perspectives, and while we're living in a world where there's, you know, conflict everywhere, let's just face it, and that's very much comes in an international setting into the workplace, you have to leave that at the door. Because while we're in Pipedrive, we're one family, and then you have to leave those views to one side. You can have them, but you can't go and sort of advocate those or try and recruit people to that perspective, because what you end up creating then are these crazy divides within the organisation. So it regulates itself based on the values, and I think that's super, super important.
And before I open up to questions, Mick, on the kind of relocation point, what kind of are the most common challenges, I guess, from the individual and the organisational perspective, if people are moving countries and cultures?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's the cultural impact is always a big one. So having a company with lots of different, you know, people mixing up is always helpful. I think from the UK perspective, we don't see huge amounts of barriers for people coming in, because it's generally a country where it's quite easy to integrate, it's quite easy to get on with things. There's no sort of big cultural barriers in terms of what you can and can't do. So I think, you know, that's a great advantage, but we're blocking that off at the moment. So, you know, I'm not seeing huge barriers other than the visa costs. You know, that's really it.
Right, does anybody have any questions? I'm going to kind of this is like the worst design chair in the world for somebody heavily pregnant. I'm just leaving myself up a bit. I believe we have a roving. Do we have roving? Hannah, thank you. Hannah will bring you a mic.
By the way, how are you feeling, Katie?
Like I'm not going into labour. It's fine.
Okay.
We've got a question over here, and then bring it to you.
So my question is, when we are talking about the global talent that we can bring to London, are we also considering the talent that already exists, the global talent? I'm especially talking about the international students. As I have seen in the last 2 months, there's a lot of posts on LinkedIn about international students, not just in London, but across US and Europe as well. Like, a lot of international students are unable to find a proper job, and they are forced to work into odd jobs like in McDonald's and all these places. So is that a place that we are also looking for?
Great question. So who wants to take that on, kind of, I guess, tapping into that talent pool? Tanya?
Yeah, I'm happy to take it. So when I think about this overall problem in accessing talent, it doesn't matter for me where they are or what route they've come into the country, whether they're already in the country or on their way in. That's kind of irrelevant. You know, it's about accessing those talent pools. So absolutely, you know, for all of the swathes of individuals, no matter what kind of career path they're at or what age group they're at, whether they're young in career or super experienced, you know, the challenge is still the same. You know, you've still got to be able to move from one visa to another, and whether they're already in the country, often they're associated or attached to a different company's visa, for example, and therefore you're still in the same position from starting over. But from a talent perspective, yes, absolutely, you want to access the very best.
And Nick, what kind of organisations struggle with when hiring international students?
Well, I think the people with grad schemes now, because of the salary levels, are struggling. That's difficult. But I think the point about foreign students graduating here, they have a graduate visa. They have 2 years, and a lot of the time, they will start off doing low-level jobs. Like many British graduates, they don't go straight into a job. So, they're pretty much the same. Local graduates might have advantages in terms of networks and other things, but just give them a chance. Give them a chance to be here. I think I'm worried that the graduate visa may go. The government's reviewing it at the moment, and if it goes, that's going to be a real problem, because then those foreign graduates don't get the chance to start, obviously get a job to pay the rent, but then move into a better job. And 2 years is a really good time to be able to do that. So, and the problem is that the government looks at the data they have on what those foreign graduates are doing in the labour market, and they say, oh, well, they're all flipping burgers. So, they're not doing what they should be doing, which is going straight into graduate jobs. And we keep saying, well, not everybody goes straight into a graduate job, including Brits. So, just be a bit more patient.
Anything to add?
And I think this is, again, one of the examples where we talk about shooting your foot, your own foot, is that you have students who are already here, which is actually like the lowest hanging fruit. They have already circled the globe to come here. So what we should be doing, or what the police should be doing, is to really make it as easy as possible to get them find the job on a salary level that is actually reasonable for the companies as well, right? So because if you then lose that person after making the effort of letting them go through your education system, it is basically it is taking away from your own economy, right? So,
question over here.
Yeah. Question. I mean, first of all, observation: if you can't bring the people to the jobs, you just end up moving the jobs to the people, and the long-term threat of that is quite clear. I think my question: you said we don't want to get political, but we most have to. And Nick, pick up a point you made earlier. Do you actually feel there's any consideration at all made to the labour market's requirements, or is immigration policy entirely set by the front page of the Daily Mail and people posturing politically about the 1% of things that can then drive some kind of culture war?
That's a good question. I'm sure we've all been thinking it, Nick.
Someone has to ask it. So
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, the fact that the government didn't even consult the Migration Advisory Committee and get any evidence before it announced this thing on the 4th of December about pushing the salaries up massively and just picking the figure that they wanted, it tells you a lot about the government is not listening to business. And the other thing is also it's not reacting in the right way, because we know that generally the British population want immigration numbers to come down overall, but when you ask them about who they want less of, they don't want less engineers, they don't want less tech people, they don't want less nurses and other skilled people who are being sponsored. So they're quite positive actually about all those things. So it's not a vote loser or winner, either way, whichever way you look at it. So politically, it's not really going to make that much difference, other than just a broad statement of, you need to bring numbers down. So they're not listening. The government is not listening, and I think that's the one thing that, if there is a new government which is of a different colour, we want them to listen. We want them to listen to business and to people about what the challenges are, what's going to help people grow their business. Obviously, we're not pushing for cheap labour, but we're pushing for good labour. Yeah.
If I may comment again, since we have like this international view from across different European countries, then we were just having the same conversation before the event started today, and for me it was really especially hard to comprehend that there was lack of like any conversation or any question, because what I'm seeing in other countries, to the point like a year ago I was asked by German immigration authorities to put together a visa comparison presentation for them about startup visas, so they could figure out which visa would work for Germany. So they are asking external parties, even outside from their local ecosystem, to, okay, give us the best practices. Similarly, I'm sitting with the Prime Minister of Estonia, figuring out, okay, those are the loopholes, so to say. We have to fix those things. And this is why we need to use our voice more, because like it can't be, because it's shooting your own foot, eating your own tail, whatever. But it's just not sustainable for the economy.
And quick follow-up question, Nick, you mentioned if we did get a government of a different hue, I mean, as the polls are suggesting, what kind of temperature are you sensing from them?
Well, I don't think they're going to rush into changing everything in the immigration field with, the day after they get elected, because that's not probably what they want to be seen to be doing. But I think give them some time, and we'll probably see some sensible changes. They will probably review all of these salary levels. They'll probably review the costs. They will probably look at potentially other ways that they might want to look at the sponsorship system, maybe by encouraging companies to train more people. Whether that's a good idea or not is difficult, and sometimes trying to link skills and immigration in the same basket is very, very tricky, particularly when the government's done a really rubbish job of the skills agenda. So, they've got some ideas. I think they will be much more positive and less worried about this. Labour voters, don't really care about immigration. It's sort of number 10 on their list, whereas Tory voters, it's like 1 or 2, So, they're not going to be so concerned about these things, and it will give them that flexibility to listen and to have proper conversations with business about where it needs to go.
I guess issues we also often see things in isolation, I think, in businesses and in politics. So like the linking of skills and immigration and not being able to see it kind of systemically is an issue. Does anybody else have any questions? Yes, we have got the mic. Yeah, one of these, I think they're ladies, I can't see, sorry.
Hi, my name is Tosin, I'm from IQVIA. So I'm just curious really, that we seem to be in a weird dichotomy whereby there's a skills shortage, but at the same time there's an awful lot of restructuring going on, even in big organisations. I just wonder what your thoughts were on that.
Tanya, is from a CPO perspective.
Yeah, no, there is. I think, if you look at all of the big tech firms across the world, there's this layoff, that layoff, and I think part of the challenge is just they've scaled too fast and the costs have increased. And, just the cost of debt is higher. There's so many factors that have come to play at the same time, which has slowed down the rate of growth. I think also, all businesses are really trying to encourage to think about new ways to think about productivity. You've got the rise of AI, which is changing the way we think about work. There's so many different things that are at play. Also, I think just post-pandemic, productivity levels, we've seen more capacity out of organisations because we allow more flexibility in changing the way people work, which of course is going to look from a capacity perspective, creating more necessary valuable hours out of your population. So I think that's interesting how, of course, we're going to see those restructurings, because I think, we're at that pivot point where the world of work has shifted and we're at that next stage of evolution. On the skills side of, it's crazy, isn't it, to think that we aren't, as nations and countries, really focusing on that workforce planning and thinking what is the future set of skills. If we look at, AI has been around, machine learning has been around for a long time, a very long time. This is not a new thing, but have we really been investing in machine learning and AI capability, all of these things which we knew were going to be coming? No, and that's, that's a problem, that's an issue. So, I think we're not keeping up fast enough. There are some countries and some populations that are doing a better job, but there are some countries that just aren't investing in that, and the education system also isn't enabling that. So I think the two go hand in hand, and we have to do a lot on thinking about future skills. Sorry, I think you...
Yeah, and exactly to kind of continue with what you said is, yes, the restructurings give kind of a little bit of, make it a little bit easier for a short time, but as you said, there's a structural gap between education and what the labor market actually needs, because we have to kind of keep in mind that a lot of the jobs that we are right now hiring for didn't even exist 15 years ago. They just didn't exist, which means that a lot of the problem is coming from just the structural education gap, and that's why it makes it even more ridiculous, because the education comes again from the policy and what have we supplied enough of this kind of skills, or have we built up the supply of that skill set? We haven't. Now employers need to hire from abroad, so we're also creating barriers there. So it's like a, in a way, double whammy for the business ecosystem, which is all connected to the governance, right?
I think there's a question just in front of the lady you just asked.
My name is Petya, I'm from ERM. I was just thinking, because you talk about, the businesses need to have a voice, so, the government, which I totally agree with and support. But you also rightfully said that the government just doesn't listen, which again, I think it's true. But I think that the problem is that the message that the government is giving to the public is just the wrong message. And it was mentioned a few times about, like how much money immigration brings, and the public just doesn't know about it. And we're still waiting for the 320 million from the EU after Brexit. So would you maybe think of changing the message and getting the voice of the business heard by the public rather than the government, and then the actual public will pressure the government to make changes? And things like, for me, like the most annoying thing is like when they talk about net migration, and it's kind of a common sense, but people don't realize that net migration is the migration of people coming in and people going out. And after Brexit, people who can go out is a lot less than before. So the net migration is not only that a lot of people came in, it's a lot of people cannot go out anymore. But this is something that the public obviously doesn't realize. And it's just like, 600, 700,000 people came in, and how much money they brought, it's a totally different story. So for me, I think that the public needs to realize what immigration actually is, and that it's not this thing that is taking the country down and is the biggest enemy of this country. And then the government may listen, because they will not have a choice.
Yeah. I think one of the things that Labour may do is they may bring in an annual report, an immigration report that's been suggested, to kind of look at where things are, to give people facts and information, and also to inform policy with a proper evidence base about what's needed in the economy. At the moment we don't have a proper evidence base for telling us how people are performing in the economy, what they're doing, what they're paying in taxes. If you want to find out what skilled workers are paying in taxes compared to local populations, you can't really get that data very easily. It's not very accessible. And if you could share that with lots of people, they would see, oh wow, these guys are amazing. They're paying masses of tax. They're all paid twice as much as local people. They must be really amazing. And a lot of them have got private healthcare as well if they're working for big corporations. So let's just give them a break.
Karoli.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, and I think that's why also we're having those discussions here and publicly as well. I think we have been. In many ways, I like to be the rebel. I'm like an immigration rebel in different countries where we operate, because we have let sometimes the politicians, especially like the extreme politicians, come with very simple messages that sound good, but actually are not reflecting the real picture. The real picture being that businesses are the engines. The politicians are getting their salaries from those engines. That's, we are paying their bills. Is that to really simplify, first of all, to really gather the data and best practices from other countries, because there are great examples. And honestly, I've seen countries paying grants to companies to bring international talent. Why? Because they see the net positive, like in 6 months it will already be coming, like basically it's a net positive for the economy. Instead of putting a huge visa fee with short term will, yes, give some money, but will actually, a lot of the small businesses that could boost that economy are not even able to pay that, kind of cross that barrier. So I think that's why I'm saying also that we sometimes let the politicians do their thing and think that we just focus on our business, but we need to think or kind of vocalize what the impact of not making the user experience of a country great actually has on our businesses, and through that to the economy. So I think you're completely right, but I think it's possible to kind of
Yeah, and there is actually quite a lot of research. I mean, I always think pretty much everything I write, I roll out the Edelman Trust Barometer, which says that the public wants to hear more from businesses on these kind of topics, and businesses actually, as an institution, is the only trusted institution among kind of like government and other areas. I was going to wrap up. Is this going to be quick? Yeah.
Sorry, this is a very, very important topic. Thank you for organizing this. My question is to Nick. Yes, as a vendor, what role are the vendors playing to be able to influence policy, be able to show the government the data, how people are so frustrated about what they're doing?
Well, we don't have that much of a voice. We have a lot of vendors on sort of employer panels that speak to the Home Office and give them feedback about the immigration system and how it works. But when you're trying to get the message into government, it's pretty difficult. We can change little things, and see things that aren't working and suggest things that might work better. And the Home Office themselves, without necessarily needing to go up to ministerial level, can do quite a lot to improve that system. So there's a lot we can do in not what we call lobbying, but it's more just about policy change and policy improvement. So we can do some things, but when you're talking about the big political picture of using these stupid tools to dampen down demand for immigration, that's something that's really beyond what we can do. And even when we do give feedback to something like the Migration Advisory Committee, often the government will just ignore it and say, oh, that's just people lobbying because they want to get more cheap labour in, And so you're kind of a bit frustrated, but we try.
Quick point, because I've got one question I want to ask.
Okay, I just want to say that, Nick, now that I'm moving here, and we have been able to change policy in 59 countries, that let's stay optimistic, work together, and we will get there, honestly.
So I've got one final question for the panel, just fun one to wrap up. As we're going into a general election, if I gave you the power to either get whatever you wanted into government, or maybe you are the next Prime Minister, dream big, what would you change about our immigration system? Tanya first.
Well, simply just adopt the digital nomad visa. I mean, that would be it. Just do it.
So
get
then
it done.
60 countries.
There you go,
Okay.
60. Yeah, I'm in.
So we just needed Tanya to get in, and then you're done.
So I think I would start from the fact that I would be the Prime Minister who would appoint, first in the world, I would appoint the Minister of User Experience. Because I think when we had a person who was actually responsible for the user experience, all of those flaws would come out. So basically, that would be a focus area, and not only for the foreigners, but also for the local people, because so it was a short point. So user experience minister, I would appoint in my cabinet.
And Nick.
I would have a buy one, get two free visa policy.
Nick's getting into power, all hail. I'm going to bring it to a close there because I'll get you out to those drinks that Karoli promised you. Thank you so much for your engagement and your questions, and please join me in thanking our lovely panel.